The city never slept. Neon lights flickered over rain-slicked streets, reflecting the pulse of ambition, fear, and power. In the heart of New Liberty City, the Marzano crime family ruled with an iron fist, their influence stretching from the underground casinos of the East Side to the shipping docks along the Hudson. Vincenzo Marzano, known to many as the Don, was more than a criminal. He was a legend. Tall, impeccably dressed, with eyes that seemed to see through men's souls, he commanded loyalty through a blend of fear and respect. His family had built an empire from nothing, and every brick of it was soaked in blood, sweat, and secrets. It all began decades ago, in a small apartment above a laundromat in Little Italy. Vincenzo's father, Carlo Marzano, was a streetwise operator, a man who knew that in the underworld, survival meant taking what others were too timid to claim. Carlo's motto was simple: power is the currency of respect. Young Vincenzo learned early. At 10, he was running messages between his father's associates. At 15, he was managing small-scale protection schemes for neighborhood businesses. By 20, he had outgrown his father's shadow, not by rebelling, but by outthinking every rival. He understood the rules of the game. Loyalty was earned, betrayal was punished, and silence was sacred. The 1980s were a turning point. The city was booming, corruption was rampant, and the law was blind if the price was right. The Marzano family expanded rapidly, taking over gambling rings, illegal trade routes, and eventually the nightclubs that became the city's heartbeat. Vincenzo's name began appearing in whispers, first among street crews, then in the tabloids, and finally in the reports of federal agents who were desperate to take him down. But with power came enemies. Other families watched the Marzanos with envy and suspicion. The Russo family, longtime rivals, plotted in shadows. Alliances were fragile, and every handshake could mask a gun beneath the table. Vincenzo, however, thrived on strategy. He was not the kind of man who confronted threats with brute force first. He dissected them, turning enemies into assets whenever possible, and removing those who resisted with surgical precision. It was during the infamous Liberty Night massacre that Vincenzo's ruthlessness became legend. A routine negotiation with the Russo family spiraled into chaos when an unexpected betrayal led to a shootout in the abandoned warehouse district. By dawn, 3 rival lieutenants were dead, 2 police officers were injured, and Vincenzo emerged unscathed, standing amidst the smoke and debris, a silhouette against the city skyline. That night, his reputation was cemented, not just as a Don, but as a ghost who could strike without warning. Yet, power always comes at a cost. Vincenzo's younger brother, Marco, once his closest ally, began to question the morality of their empire. Marco had fallen in love with Elena, a schoolteacher who despised the criminal world. She became the voice of conscience Vincenzo never sought, and Marco's loyalty began to waver. Conflicts between the brothers simmered quietly, like magma beneath a seemingly calm surface. By the 1990s, the Marzano empire was untouchable. Casinos flourished, construction contracts were subtly manipulated, and politicians paid homage in whispers. But the feds were relentless. Agent Thomas Riker, a man obsessed with taking down Vincenzo, infiltrated the family's operations, planting surveillance and gathering evidence. Every meeting, every phone call, every transaction became a thread in the tapestry of a coming storm. Then came the betrayal of Venice, a business trip that should have been routine. Vincenzo traveled to Venice, Italy, under the guise of expanding his European ventures. There, a close lieutenant, Salvatore Sal De Luca, turned on him, hoping to curry favor with a rival Italian syndicate. Vincenzo narrowly escaped an ambush, returning to New Liberty with a resolve sharper than ever. The city sensed a shift. The Don was no longer just a ruler. He was a man seeking vengeance. The story of the Marzano family is not just one of crime. It's a story of loyalty, ambition, love, and betrayal. Vincenzo's rise was meteoric, but the threads of his empire were fraying. Friends became informants, allies became threats, and the city that once bowed to him now whispered his name in fear and awe. In the climactic showdown set in the shadow of the old docks where Carlo had first begun his empire, Vincenzo faced enemies old and new, explosions of gunfire, the roar of engines, and the cries of betrayal marked the fall of the empire. By the end, only Vincenzo and Marco remained. Brothers, yet divided by blood, love, and the inevitability of their world. The city moved on as cities do. Skyscrapers rose, businesses changed hands, and the neon lights continued to flicker over rain-slicked streets. But the legend of Vincenzo Marzano, the last Don, remained, a story whispered in alleyways, told in hushed tones in smoky bars, and remembered as a testament to the price of power, the fragility of loyalty, and the haunting allure of the underworld. Yet, even as the city moved forward, the shadows of the past refused to fade completely. There were whispers of unseen hands guiding events from the dark corners of New Liberty, of deals struck in secret and debts long overdue. Vincenzo's name had become a kind of cautionary talisman, a reminder that power, no matter how absolute, was never truly safe from the consequences it sowed. Marco, now carrying the weight of both grief and survival, found himself wandering through the streets his family had once ruled. Each alley, each abandoned warehouse, spoke to him in echoes of laughter, betrayal, and blood. He often paused outside the old nightclub that had been the jewel of the Marzano Empire, running his hand along its graffiti-scarred wall, remembering the nights of celebration, the strategic meetings, the hushed threats exchanged in the smoky haze of dimly lit rooms. It was here, amidst the detritus of a vanished empire, that Marco began to sense a new rhythm in the city, one that was quieter, more cautious, yet pregnant with possibility. Meanwhile, the law enforcement agencies that had once chased Vincenzo were left chasing shadows. Agent Thomas Riker had retired, but his obsession had left a lasting mark on the police force. Young detectives still studied Vincenzo's rise and fall as if he were a case study in human cunning, ambition, and the perilous seduction of absolute control. Some admired him secretly, others despised him openly. But all agreed on one thing. The Marzano family, in all its ruthlessness and brilliance, had changed the very nature of crime in New Liberty forever. And somewhere in the corners where the neon lights barely reached, whispers persisted that Vincenzo was not gone entirely. Stories emerged of a man in an unassuming cafe in a distant city, always dressed sharply, always watching, always calculating. Perhaps he had retreated to lick his wounds and rebuild elsewhere, or perhaps these tales were merely the fantasies of those too eager to believe in a ghost. But for those who had lived through the reign of the Marzanos, the possibility was enough to keep them awake at night, hearts racing with fear and fascination. The city, relentless in its transformation, seemed oblivious to the invisible currents beneath its streets. Skyscrapers rose higher, technology advanced, new gangs tried and failed to claim the shadows once dominated by the Marzanos. Yet the lessons of the past lingered. Loyalty could be bought, fear could be wielded, and power, once seized, demanded vigilance. Marco, now a reluctant guardian of a memory too potent to erase, understood that his family's story was far from over. In the world of the underworld, legends never truly die. They wait, And so, as the rain pattered against the windows of high-rise apartments and taxi lights painted fleeting lines across glistening streets, the spirit of Vincenzo Marzano, the last dawn, remained alive in every whispered secret, every cautious glance, and every decision made in the murky gray between law and crime. The city moved on, but somewhere, the ghost of the Marzano Empire watched, patient, eternal, and unyielding.
If you made it to the end, thank you. Please leave a like and subscribe. It helps me create more stories like this one, because some secrets are still waiting to be heard.